Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 7 of the Qualiverse. I'm Jim Maltese, and today we are going to be talking about signal-to-noise demystified, or should I say, dehistified. So is there anything more annoying than listening to a wonderful podcast with great audio where the talents sound crisp and clear, only to be interrupted by some low-budget advertisement where the hiss in the recording is nearly as loud as the speech? And listen, I'm all for supporting artists, but if you're going to interrupt my show, the least you can do is pay attention to the audio quality of the content. And I know I sound like a grumpy old man. Back in my day, advertisements were recorded in a professional broadcaster recording studio where they knew a thing or two about signal to noise. But the point is, that hiss that creeps up every now and again is representative of an audio system that is not meeting user expectations. If users can hear that hiss, something is not right in the gain structure of the system. The system signal, that's the sound we want, is not playing at levels far enough away from the system noise. Those are the sounds we don't want. And this difference is called signal-to-noise ratio, and that's what we'll be discussing today. And whenever I talk about signal-to-noise ratios, I'm always reminded of that classic vision of a middle school rock guitarist getting ready to jam out. They flip on the amplifier, and everyone hears that hum and the sss before he starts to play. Clearly, his system is not optimized for great signal-to-noise performance. We hear the hiss and the hum before they even start to play. I even had one guitarist say that hiss is how they know the amp is on. So obviously it's not a system flaw, it's a feature. Right. So why do we care about this signal to noise stuff? Is it just about not hearing hiss? Well, I mean, yes and no. There is certainly an aspect of not wanting people to notice the hiss in a professionally installed system. But more importantly, we want people to easily understand or enjoy the signal audio. If the system noise is too loud compared to the signal, it becomes difficult and or fatiguing to pay attention. An example. This recording is, I'll call the noise, and so I hope it's becoming a little bit more difficult to pay attention to what I'm saying. So the signal to noise in this particular system is not very large. The Royer lecture that you're hearing at the same time as me is very small. But now as I decrease the noise, it becomes a little bit easier to hear my voice. And as I completely take it away, it's still kind of there. But as I increase the signal to noise, as I increase the distance, the levels between the signal, my voice, and that recorded lecture, it becomes easier to understand. It becomes less fatiguing. And when I completely stop it, now all of a sudden you can just hear my beautiful, luxurious voice, and we can move on and have a real conversation. And that's what it's about, right? Think about having a conversation in a nice, quiet room versus having a conversation in a crowded bar. In a nice, quiet room, aka very little noise and a large signal-to-noise ratio because our conversation can be that much removed from the noise level, it's easy to pay attention and stay engaged with what is being said and discussed. But in a crowded bar where we have lots of noise and a very small signal-to-noise ratio, so the difference between the signal and the noise is very small, people have to shout to be heard. You got to get up on someone's ear. You got to just spit in their face all the time. Not everything is understood. There's a lot of, huh? What'd you say? I missed that. What? And it's tedious. It's tedious to try to pay attention in a crowded bar. And my audio systems have been called many things, but if someone called an audio system of mine tedious, that would hurt. So we certainly want a large signal-to-noise ratio for our audio systems. But exactly how large a signal-to-noise ratio should we want? If we're saying that a large signal-to-noise is great, shouldn't we just maximize the system performance criteria to get as big as possible? And I'll say, not exactly. So in most systems, the noise level is what it is. Right? A room's acoustical ambient noise may be due to HVAC, building noise, generators, elevator generators, motors, outside noise, sirens from the windows. It might be very difficult to get it better. And there may be ways to improve it slightly, but typically to get a larger signal to noise ratio, the difference between the signal and the noise, we have to increase the signal level. But if we increase the signal level too much, the system becomes uncomfortable to listen to. So as long as I can clearly understand what is being said and I don't notice the noise, our needs are met. We don't need to maximize signal to noise, we just need it to be adequate for the use case. And so let's talk a little bit about what's adequate. For intelligibility, Avixa suggests having an acoustical signal-to-noise ratio of at least 24 dB. That means the sound pressure level, SPL, of the signal audio should be at least 24 dB above any ambient noise in the space. In well-behaved rooms, this is easy to attain, right? In a well-behaved classroom or conference room, the ambient noise should be well below 40 dB SPL. So to achieve an acoustic signal-to-noise ratio in a room with an ambient noise of 40 dB SPL, our signal level just needs to be at least 64 dB SPL, 40 plus 24. And this is a very comfortable listening level for conference spaces. With a signal-to-noise ratio of more than 24 dB, the great news is it'll also be very intelligible. The trouble comes when the ambient noise in a room is loud, like in a restaurant, for example. Ambient noise may be upwards of like 75 dB SPL with people talking, music playing, glasses clinking, etc. Attaining a signal level 24 dB above that becomes problematic. It's certainly attainable. Several loudspeakers and amplifier systems can deliver audio at well over 100 dB SPL. That's not the problem. Problem is, at 100 dB SPL, that's nearing the threshold of pain for humans. So a compromise is definitely required there to maintain the intelligibility of the system while also protecting the listeners. So we can't make that 24. We've got to do something where it's still intelligible, but we're not going to get sued because we're destroying people's hearing. So as long as we're paying attention to it, as long as we're having these conversations, justifying our recommendations to the client, whatever it may be, whatever the solution is going to be better than just surprising the users at the end of the project with a less than ideal audio system. And perfect example, right? We had an audio system for the New York Board of Trade where they needed to get above the raucous within that pit of people trading and selling stock and I want to buy two, give me three of 400, blah, blah, blah. So the noise, the sound system had to overcome. We measured at 98 dB SPL. So that's at the threshold of pain to begin with. And we have to overcome that for our signal level so that the caller, the person on the microphone who's calling all the trades needs to overcome that. There needs to be some signal to noise ratio where they're not screaming into the mic, where they can be heard and they can be understood over that 98 dB SPL noise floor. We don't want to make people deaf, but the caller had to be heard in that pit. And so we agreed to the sound system being able to deliver 108 dB SPL. It got approved. We did not want to get sued. We had to get some folks involved to make sure we were doing the right thing. But that's what we're talking about, right? It's not the 24 dB that Avixa recommends, but we also don't want to cause people to develop hearing issues as they use the system. And so that 10 dB from 98 to 108, that 10 dB signal to noise was the right solution for that system. So we've spent a lot of time talking about acoustical signal to noise ratios, where we're comparing the signal levels with ambient noise levels in terms of dBSPL, sound pressures. But how does this translate to the electrical signal to noise ratio? In the sound pressure realm, our biggest concern is going to be intelligibility. In the electronics realm, intelligibility is certainly still a concern. We definitely want to make sure our signal is separated from our noise electronically tremendously so that the system stays intelligible. But now we also don't want to make sure anyone hears that pesky hiss when no one is talking. We're still talking of a very similar measurement, right? We only care about finding the difference in levels between the signal and the noise. But instead of measuring levels in sound pressures, or dBSPL, we're simply measuring the difference in voltages, or dBU. The signal levels are the same. They are still the wanted audio signals in the system. But the noise level is not the acoustical ambient noise in the room. Now the noise level we are measuring is the electronic noise level of the system. And all electronic systems have a noise level. And the key here is we want that electronic noise to be much less than our acoustic ambient noise in the room so that no one hears that hiss. The hiss is going to be there no matter what. But as long as that hiss level is much, much lower than the ambient noise, we're good and no one will notice it. So as long as the acoustical ambient noise is less than 30 dB is 30 dB below the ambient noise in the space, no one will notice it. And that's exactly what we want. So let's think about that for a second. Let's say we adjust our listen level, our signal level of the system to be 65 dB SPL. So that's acoustic level, that's sound pressures. In order to generate this listen level, the sound pressure, our amplifier must deliver a voltage signal level of plus 10 dBu. Just to keep it straight. So to generate that 65 dB SPL listen level, our electronic signal level is plus 10 dBu. I put a plus 10 dBu voltage to that amplifier and it generates 65 dB SPL in sound pressure. Now, in order to maintain the intelligibility of our system, the acoustical ambient noise level, the ambient noise in the space, must be 40 dB SPL or less, providing an acoustical signal-to-noise ratio of more than 24 dB. That's the AVIXA recommendation, right? So we've got a 65 dB SPL level, and our ambient noise has to be less than 40 dB SPL, and we're good. In order to assure that no one in the room can hear hiss in the system, the electronic noise level in the system must be minus 45 dBu, or less, and that provides an electronic signal-to-noise ratio of more than 55 dB. So our signal level is 65 dB SPL plus 10 dBu. Our ambient noise level is going to be that 40 dB SPL, and our electronic noise level is going to be minus 45 dBu, which is going to be 30 dB less than the ambient noise in the room. So I'm going to be intelligible, no one's going to notice the hiss, and that's exactly where we want our gain structure to be set. We want a good intelligible system in the acoustical realm, and we don't want to hear any pesky hiss or hum in the electronic realm. And that's signal to noise. But how do we fix it? It really comes down to gain structure, is where we apply gain in the system. And an example of this is always the constant struggle between the live sound folks and the installed sound folks. So two areas where a system applies a lot of gain in an audio signal chain is the microphone preamplifier. That brings the microphone level up to line level, and then the amplifier at the very end, which brings line level to loudspeaker level, and that's a big jump. As the signal passes through more and more components, the noise level is going to increase. It's just inherent in all electronic devices that it's going to add a little bit more to that noise floor. Additionally, we pay a lot of money for our microphone preamp, so the amplification there, while it does introduce some noise, we're paying a lot of money to limit that noise introduced. So in installed sound, we do most of our amplification at the microphone. So we bring that little tiny microphone level up to line level. At the preamp, we pass it through the system at 0 dBu, and then we amplify it just a little bit. In conference systems, we're typically putting way less than a watt into our loudspeakers, and so the amplifier is doing very little. And that's great because that means the amplifier at the end of the system is not amplifying that much noise. Our signal to noise can be maintained. On the flip side, live sound folks want to provide the mixing operator, the guy at the mixing console, with as much gain as possible, with as much level as possible. So that means the amplifiers are turned all the way up to 11, not even 10, they go up to 11 so that the operator can do whatever they want with the system, right? The gain is the priority there. Level is the priority, not signal to noise ratio, unfortunately. So what that means is to attain those good listen levels, they're probably not going to set the microphone preamps up that high. The output of the mixer probably isn't going to be 0 dBu because the amplifiers are cranked so much. It's probably going to be minus 30, minus 40 dBu. What that means is that the speech level coming out of that mixer, because the gain is set so low, because the amplifiers are doing all the work, the amplifiers are doing all that gain, the signal level is going to be much closer to the noise floor of that mixer. And so when you get to those amplifiers that are set to 11, it amplifies the signal for sure, but it is also amplifying that noise as well. So you're not going to get that optimized signal to noise that you can get in installed sound. In live sound, they prioritize gain, right? They're incredible audio engineers and technicians, and they just happen to prioritize gain because that's what they do. They need to give the operator, the mixing operator, as much gain as possible. They do so sometimes at the expense of signal to noise, because at the end of that chain where you're amplifying everything to the max, you're also amplifying the noise. But in installed sound, we have the luxury of prioritizing signal to noise performance because we have way more control over how the users will use the system, right? In live sound, they have to be ready for everything. In installed sound, we have a much more limited use case, and we can pay more attention to gain structure and limit the hiss that is heard in the room. So that's just two ways of looking at gain structure. But if you do hear that hiss, you can investigate the gain structure and see exactly what's going on, and that'll probably decrease the noise in the system if you can apply the gain differently at different levels. If you can apply gain closer to the microphone, you are going to get a much better signal to noise ratio in your system. And so that's really all there is to it. We want to make sure our signal level, the wanted audio, is much higher than the noise, the unwanted audio in the system. Acoustically, we want a signal to noise ratio of more than 24 dB to assure we can understand what is being said. Electronically, we want a signal to noise ratio of more than 55 dB to assure that nobody hears any hiss. You'd think advertising and marketing firms would understand this, but no. They will spend all their time making sure the blue in the logo stays in the royal blue realm without bleeding into French blue realm, while not even noticing the annoying, amateurish, and dare I say it, you know what, I'm going to say it, the tedious hiss in their ads. It's much more important to make sure the clients sound good rather than just look good. After all, audio comes first in the audiovisual industry for a reason. So thank you for joining me for this talk on signal to noise, and I hope you're enjoying Qualiverse. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Have an AV day.